Welcome back to the Cinema Retro Podcast, everyone. Today we have our Halloween special.
Ooh, Halloween special, spooky.
We're going to be talking about Brian De Palma's 1976 film Carrie, which is a classic staple of the horror genre and a must-see Halloween spooky film.
Yeah, and this episode I feel like is a fun end of October one because not only do we just talk about Carrie, but we also kind of talk about some horror films of the era and horror films that we've recently seen and other films of today that we like. It will relate back to the Halloween that you're all experiencing right now.
Just get ready to live the most terrifying days of your life, high school.
Yeah, it does really kind of tap into your anxiety around adolescence and coming of age in high school in a really spooky way.
I do think we kind of came to the conclusion that unlike Blow Up, which was more interesting to talk about than to watch, Carrie is a really rich watch, and it's sometimes kind of hard to talk about because so much is on the screen, so much is the energy, so much is these like visceral things that it's hard to articulate. So if you haven't seen Carrie, definitely I would recommend watching that first so you understand the inexplicable feelings that it can provoke.
Hope you enjoy. I had the fortunate opportunity to meet Brian De Palma a couple years ago at a writers event in Long Island, and I went up to him and began talking to him about his use of the split diopter technique, which I think is a really interesting and unique visual flair that Carrie and a lot of his other films have. And I asked him where he got the idea for that, and he said that he was inspired by Orson Welles' use of deep focus in Citizen Kane and the idea that you could have one object in the foreground and one in the background, and they could both be in focus on opposite sides of the frame. And I just thought that that was a very interesting thing about this movie. But before we get too much into analysis,
Wow, that was great. What a great anecdote.
can I pass it over to you, Jake, to give us a little synopsis of the movie?
All right. So, in case you haven't seen it, there will be spoilers. I guess this whole spoilers, whatever. It's basically a really messed up Douglas Sirk suburban melodrama is my take on it. But the plot is that Carrie White, who is played by Sissy Spacek, is this high school girl who seems to basically kind of be a little underdeveloped. Her mom is crazy religious fundamentalist, and she has her first period at high school and had no idea that that was a thing. And so she goes crazy. Her mom is convinced that that's evidence that she's a sinner, and basically torments her. She's also getting tormented at school as well. So she has all of these really mean classmates who are constantly kind of bullying her and poking fun at her. And she realized she has this telekinetic power that she then wreaks havoc on the rest of her classmates and her mother. So is that good? Is that enough context to get started there?
Yeah, that's good. Also, I think prom is a big part of the whole movie.
Yes.
That like
Yes.
the girls that are bullying her, that like make fun of her when she first gets her period in the gym shower. They're threatened with the punishment of not being able to go to senior prom, unless they, do detention with the PE teacher. Carrie comes to her the height of her powers both by telling her mom and forcing her mom to leave her alone through words and through telekinesis, as well as at the actual prom, the evil seniors who we had met at the beginning of the film dump pig blood on her as the ultimate like prank. And that's when she freaks out and takes revenge on the school and burns down the gym and everybody dies essentially at the prom.
And this is why I texted you guys that it's the first school shooter movie, question mark?
Wow, we're just opening up with the hot take.
Yeah, it's a really nice into the discussion. But
Yeah, I mean, Outcast who takes revenge, definitely. Was that either of your first times watching it in preparation? No, me neither.
That was my first time watching it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and which is so weird because so many of my favorite movies are like Stephen King adaptations, and I also really like Brian De Palma. So my first thought was, how does this kind of rank with my I love Misery. I think Misery is excellent. Like total guilty pleasure. I was like, how does this rank with Misery?
Mhm.
And then also The Shining and so many others. But it was my first time watching it, and yeah, I had the same thought that you did, Miles, about the kind of it felt so relevant for that reason.
I had seen it before, but rewatching it this time, I think I picked up on a lot more now that I think I must have watched it when I was in high school. So now
Mm.
being an adult who's no longer thinks it's cool to kill people who are mean, I definitely have a lot. I think I understand a lot more nuance in between a lot of the characters and the relationships. Not that the film is essentially is very nuanced. It's a horror that ends in crazy gore, but maybe my perspective on watching it has changed.
I think it is the first mainstream high school horror film. I think
Mhm.
that's fair to say.
Yeah.
There were others, but they were more B pictures. Um, this kind of had more of an elevated new Hollywood look, had a more serious director. You know, it's the debut for a lot of famous actors like Nancy Allen and John Travolta and Sissy
Mhm.
Spacek. Um, so yeah, I think it kind of it seems to me now everybody uses the term elevated horror, very fashionable term to describe like A24 horror films, but this kind of is a type of taking a B movie Stephen King dime store novel concept and doing it in like a Spielberg, you know, way.
It's funny, I was thinking about also Jake comparing it to other Stephen King adaptations, specifically The Shining. Um, and maybe because De Palma has such like visual language that he uses, it felt so not Kubrick. There was more similarities between a movie like Halloween or something, where it's more closer to not that that's a necessarily be horror film, but it has more of the
Mhm.
tropes of that and more of
Mhm.
like the score, the psycho, right, like the psycho score when she like shatters the mirror and it's like kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I think that it's interesting because it's in that great period where it's so confident in itself as a standalone story that there's not this you're sort of waiting. Everyone is so used to just getting jump scared all the time at the theater. There's always this like constant element of wanting to go as like a thrill ride. And something like this is so confident in itself that it becomes more of like a psychological, um, psychological story. And in a way that's so much creepier, and harder to swallow because you're like,
totally.
I was looking at the time and I was like, okay, the movie's like three-fourths the way done. You know, there really haven't been very many horror elements. And it's just like this all out bloodbath.
Uh-huh.
Which I really liked because I think today we're so desensitized that everyone's sort of throwing stuff at you. Also, one thing I'll note on this is that I think I don't know um, for sure, but I think this is like one of the first horror movies to have like acting nominations at the Academy Awards. Like it was like it was mainstream in that sense. It was kind of bringing up the genre as something that's maybe more prestige in a way, and I think Sissy Spacek is um, has a lot to do with that. Should be given a lot of
Yeah,
credit for that.
definitely. I think a lot of it is also that sensuality that the director is so forthcoming with presenting.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of horror movie, it can be really like pornographic in the way that it presents like sexuality, especially with the female body. But it's just there's a lot more nuance and maturity, I think, in the way that De Palma presents it.
I definitely agree with that. And Jake, to your point, I think that I watched it with my roommate who hadn't seen it before. This was his first
Mhm.
viewing, and afterwards, I was like, "What do you think about that?" And his immediate reaction was, "That was a horror film?" He was, like, confused. He was like, "How is that a horror film?" I'm like, "Well,
Mhm.
why would it not be?" I'm like, "Just because there's no jump scares," and I guess it kinda gets to what is a horror film, because I really think that the theme of the movie is about adolescent trauma and adolescent failure and humiliation in
Mhm.
a high school setting, and yes, you have the supernatural elements, and I guess it has the aesthetic conventions of horror, but thematically and narratively, how is it really a horror film, to your point?
Yeah, I think back to something like The Birds, like that's a great example of something that's very obviously a horror. And I think part of the hallmark is afterwards thinking, you get in your own head about something and like to this day I see like a massive crow and I'm like, looking over my shoulder. But there's something there's like a psychological element to it. I mean, if you see a horror movie that is just all blood and guns and jump scare, it's like, yeah, it's crazy in the moment, like a roller coaster, but once you get off the roller coaster, you're done and then you move on with your day. Something like this really penetrates your soul and in such a scary way. But I think what also adds to that is I, I think it's underratedly funny. I mean, people may have commented on this, but it's actually funny in some sense. Like
John
there's a couple.
Travolta is amazing, like, as a
Yeah,
comic relief character.
no, totally. Or it's just there's like so many little moments that I think about. Even the mom saying you're going to prom and then like the lightning strikes or whatever. Like that's what brought me to like the Douglas Sirk thing because I was like, this is like hilariously melodramatic and it's actually about like neurotic, bizarre people. Like I found it really funny up until the prom scene. And I think that's part of what draws you in because it's sort of inviting in a sense. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I love thinking about this movie and lineage also with the gothic horror. I love a good gothic noir film, which I think setting is so important in a lot of the 1940s, 1950s gothic horror films because they take place in churches or old castles or haunted places. So it's so significant that it takes place in a high school and in a home and in a prayer room in the home. It's a total like it's just such a statement to be making about where this like horror genre has gone. And I think really
Mhm.
reflective of like what horror in the 60s, 70s was doing, which was kind of blending yeah, supernatural freaky elements with like the home life kind of thing and the more mundane interpersonal relationship.
Jake, to wanted to respond to what you said about the comedic aspect of it. Piper Laurie, that's the name of the mother, the woman who plays
Mhm.
Carrie's mom. She was a old Hollywood actress, but at the time of the movie, she had kind of put her career aside and she was living in somewhat of a retirement with her family. And when she first read the script, she didn't get it at all and she kind of hated it. And then her husband read it and was like, well, I think De Palma's coming at this almost like a comedy and he has this kind of comedic directorial style. And then after she had kind of reframed it that way, or her husband had reframed it that way, she read it again and she kind of liked it. And then she, of course, was nominated for an Oscar, like you mentioned, and she just couldn't believe it because in during the making of it, she saw it as this kind of silly
Over the
romp.
top kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's being considered as like a legitimate dramatic performance, and she was kind of she didn't take it that seriously.
Well, do you, Miles, see it as serious or more comedic or both?
I think that's kind of the beauty of it is you don't really know what
Yeah.
he's doing. Sometimes he's playing it like a high school comedy, like almost like a John Landis film, and then other times he's playing it like a really disturbing, slasher, and it's this uneasy feeling of what register are we in right now, and you don't really know. But the
Yeah.
mom's character obviously is very melodramatic.
It's weird looking at it too in hindsight because I just saw Big Wednesday over the summer, the John Milius film, and what was his name? The guy that she goes to prom with. His
Tommy?
anyway,
William Cat.
William Catt. Okay, so he was in Big Wednesday, kind of playing a similar kind of character, and then you have which is like sort of a um, uh, you know coming of age kind of film. And then you also have John Travolta, which was known later for stuff like Grease and everything else. So watching it in hindsight with those people in there, kind of playing very similar characters to their other films, I think heightens that element of what is De Palma doing here? And a part of that I think makes the horror more effective because you are, you know, you're sort of thrown off a little bit and it's closer to real life in that sense.
Even like I totally agree. The acting and the performances can be both so melodramatic that it's kind of uncomfortable, but it's also kind of funny.
Right.
But I think also a lot of filmmaking choices, like I don't know, the mirror breaking with the high-pitched noise and the absurdity of the screaming girls in the shower. Everything is so over the top. Even like I was thinking about the hose when it was like killing everybody at the end. It's like it's kind of funny. It's so
Yeah.
ridiculous and like it looks like a silly object. When it's like causing all this destruction and it's supposed to be the crux of the horror. So yeah, I think you guys are spot on. I think that's what a lot of horror is too. Like I think the horror genre constantly plays between that. You get so scared and then you laugh because it's you've gotten so frightened and it's make believe kind of thing. Um
I
yeah.
think a lot of the movie brats mimicked uh, the great directors who came before them, and De Palma has often been called the new Hitchcock. That's what he was called on a lot of talk shows. Like if you go and
Mhm.
watch an interview
Oh, interesting.
with him and Dick Cavett, they say, "Oh, some people are saying you're the new Hitchcock." What do you guys think about that? Like, do you think if you were to frame this movie with a Hitchcockian lens, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think Hitchcock was really good at finding the horror also in relationships between people and in the inner psyche of people. Like really like the way that Hitchcock's characters weave in and out of the plot of horror in a lot of his films. And I think Del Palma does a lot of that as well. Also, I keep saying Del Palma, De Palma. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. De Palma. Um, I think he does that as well in the film because there's this supernatural element and a lot of filmmaking choices that are weaving in and out of interpersonal relationships and inner psyches that you're getting in and out of the characters. But I do think that Hitchcock does more of yeah, like the birds you have or like I don't know, you have a lot of outside shadowy figures and forces in Hitchcock films versus I think in a film like Carrie, the darkness is so within her. It's like so it's within her mom, within her. It's something that is like very deeply inside the character that you're following the whole time.
Mhm.
Which is not as common, I think, in a Hitchcock film.
Yeah, I don't think the comparison is wrong, and I think you're definitely right, Isabel. Um, I think what strikes me as most similar is like how good they are at suspense, handling suspense. That moment where it just feels like it's taking forever for the blood to drop on her head, and even then you're still like so with it. Like his handling of suspense was definitely masterful in that sense, and I just saw like a lot of aesthetic similarities to that and Psycho, um, just like the whole Psycho series actually. Um, y- at the same time, like he handles suspense really well in like Blowout, for example. With John Travolta again. I think that's probably the one through line I can see with De Palma's work in Hitchcock.
The through line between Hitchcock and De Palma, I would
Mhm.
say voyeuristic obsession. I would say suspense. I would say kind of a perverse sexuality. I see a lot of those similarities. I mean, there's definitely a lot of direct homages in the film. I mean, the name of the high school that Carrie burns down is Bates High School from Psycho,
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
and Bates. And then Isabel, you mentioned like the sound effect with the knives, and like that's totally taken from Hitchcock. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of direct homage, and I think also the way that De Palma thinks about where the camera is at all times. I think that's what kind of separates him from maybe a B, movie director in this genre is he's constantly thinking about how can I move the camera in this scene on a crane or something to give it this really kind of dynamic scope. Then that's what Hitchcock was famous for, these incredible ways of placing the camera in a scene.
What do you guys think about kind of the character of religion in the film? And if that is something to be taken seriously, or is it kind of more of a device that is used to give it more of a spooky feel?
The mom represents like a very, I guess, bizarre, like neurotic strain of whatever she's on. I don't know what. I don't know if
Protestant
there's any
for
explain.
sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I think about the scene when her mom goes to the other girl's house and she's like, the girls need Jesus, like you need Jesus, and the mom's like, yeah, we kind of do, but then she kind of laughs at it. She like
No,
snickers.
she says we live in like a godless world, and the
Yeah.
other woman goes, "Cheers to that."
Yeah. She cheers to that, and then she realizes that what she's doing is like sacrilege, and she's like, you're right, yeah. So she's like, there's this idea that she like kind of agrees that society probably does have some sort of moral decay, but that she thinks that this fanatical Christian solution is silly too.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it's kind of this weird thing where in the 70s, I mean, it was a increasingly secular, or from some perspectives, godless time.
Well, it's just a big delusionment with everything, right?
Yeah.
So breakdown of the family, breakdown of religious communities, breakdown of everything.
Billy Graham being really huge and like a sort of like Protestant revival a little bit. Now it seems sort of like tropey and overdone. Like I feel like a lot of these kind of like A24 horrors are trying to skew a religion where it doesn't seem like it has as much institutional power as it once did. And so I think that's why like watching this, it makes more sense and it doesn't feel as ridiculous as maybe something like this coming out today.
Yeah, totally. Like the whole there was a whole genre called like Catholic horror, and it was basically, wait, what if actually Christianity is evil? And like that's like, it's become a bit of a cliche. And I agree, in modern movies it makes no sense because we live in a completely secular society at this point. And so to make Christianity the boogeyman seems kind of, it doesn't resonate with modern people. But at this time, at De Palma's time of making this movie, I mean, all the new Hollywood directors grew up probably in pretty Christian households, besides Spielberg and the Jewish directors, because that was just what the country was like at the time, and that was just part of everyday life.
I do
Yeah.
think, Miles, you said this at the beginning of the episode that you hit on kind of like the main theme of the film, which is kind of more about suburban decay or like the cruelty of a high school or something like that. And I think that really is the main thesis, and that the religion aspect plays like a heightening role in that, you have a purity, and then you have sin, and then you have the underworld kind of thing. Like it kind of, religion gives us the archetypes that like can be so fulfilled to the fullest extent in high school and like in adolescence, I think. Yeah, I was wondering if you could say more about where that came from for you and like what you saw in the film that really hit those points.
The adolescent trauma part.
Yeah.
Well, I just think De Palma goes to great lengths to make Sissy Spacek this extremely sympathetic, victimized character, and really place you inside of what it's like to be this bullied high school traumatized girl. And I think that even even the explanation for why the mom is religious is because the dad ran out on them. Carrie says, mom, the devil didn't take him, he ran away with another woman. And she gets, so you kind of see that these characters are using religion or these other ideologies as band-aids
Yeah.
for some kind of trauma that happened in their life. To the mom, it was being abandoned. To Carrie, it was being humiliated. And she uses her supernatural powers to overcome that.
I almost see the film as not necessarily about religion. It's more about that being something that like young people are coming up against, right? So like there's parents of that generation being much more religious than they are. I think my first instinct on this film was comparing it to other coming of age films of the time. So I was thinking like American Graffiti, especially when Travolta was in the car. I was like, this seems like a scene right out of American Graffiti.
Totally.
And then Big Wednesday too. I was thinking of Summer of 42, all these things. And I was like, okay, wait, these are all coming of age films for mostly young guys. This is a kind of coming of age film for like a young woman. Um, and that dichotomy was really fascinating. I don't think there's any other films like it for that reason, and for it to be that kind of horror film is interesting, especially as like it's somewhat of like an early kind of body horror kind of film as
Yeah.
well.
Also, not only about, it's like centered on a female character, like the whole thing comes from her getting her period, which is like an incredibly visceral personal like symbol of femininity and womanhood, which is kind of like, damn, he both Stephen King and De Palma went there, kind of thing.
Mhm.
What did you
Um,
guys think of the naked opening scene, to tie into that idea, Isabel?
I don't know. I think you could read it both ways. I think you could see something. Um, it's honestly it's kind of obvious, but it reminds me of Lolita. And that like I find when I read Lolita and when I have read it before, like I see a lot of sarcasm and a lot of like tongue in cheek, a lot of this is so over the top, perverted, it's almost funny kind of thing. But also there's like some real like deep sensuality and yeah, maybe some kind of like perverted beauty in the kind of thing. And I think that a lot of that opening scene and a lot of Sissy Spacek, like her as an actress has both of that. Like she's so alien and young looking, it's kind of insane, but she's also just like really stunningly beautiful and charismatic and easy to watch. So yeah, I think a lot of these films, like in a lot of literature that deals with like young women and like the beauty of young women has to like both walk that line of like it's gross and it's like freaky, but also like there's a part of society that like is legit about this, and that's something that we have to reckon with, you know?
She's
And
almost
also depicting puberty. Sorry, depicting puberty on screen is very similar to what we were watching in Walkabout, you know.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
think of that like the Blue Lagoon thing, like that line is hard to cover in a serious way. And I actually think De Palma and Roeg do it quite well, using these kind of like these genre films in a way to depict what can often be like a really terrifying part of young people's lives.
Carrie is almost like a creature. She's in this kind of state of nature. She's not like fully human. To your point, Isabel, you said she's almost alien. Like she seems so at odds with all of these settings. I almost feel like she's an animal or something, something kind of wild and
Mhm.
not fully human. Because she doesn't understand these human things, and she's kept apart from society. And going back to the split diopter, I think that's another use of that, is that he always juxtaposes, some authority figure or some group, and then has Carrie by herself, like in the background,
Mhm.
and the group in the foreground, or vice versa. And so the use of the split diopter really enhances that alienation that we feel for Carrie. And she is othered. She's othered very aggressively by the camera and by the story.
Yeah.
Miles, can you explain what the split diopter is for listeners who may not know?
Yeah. Essentially, what the split diopter does is it allows you to have one thing in the foreground and one thing in the background and have them both in focus at the same time. And so it's basically an illusion of deep focus, because deep focus is where the whole frame is in focus, versus the split diopter. It's just the background and the foreground. In the middle, there's like a blurred line that kind of patches the two together. I think it lends almost kind of like a comic book feel to some of De Palma's scenes, because you have these two contrasting images side by side.
Yeah. Also on the point of alien characters, I was there's a book that just came out about Jane Birkin. And so I was reading a little bit about that. And a lot of it was about her body and how she was really skinny and tall, and how that was kind of more trendy in the 60s, 70s than 50s, 40s, which were much more vivacious, womanly figures. Those were the types of stars that were on screen. Um, and some of that was maybe, Jane Birkin being British post World War II malnutrition. But I think about Sissy Spacek. I don't know. She looks so young and she's so skinny and she is freckled faced and has blonde eyebrows, blonde features. So totally alien. And then also Shelley Duvall, who equally skinny, freaky, crazy looking. And it's just this kind of interesting phenomena that happens in the 60s, 70s, where I think the public is hungry for odd looking women on screen who maybe represent this kind of alienation that they feel in the world, and a breaking of a lot of beauty norms and societal norms that the 50s produced. Shelley Duvall and a lot of these women are still so like striking today. Like they have a lasting craziness to the way that they look. That's really like I think still something that the public is hungry for right now, which is kind of interesting.
That's so true. And casting itself is such an underrated art. Finding somebody
Totally.
that is totally photogenic, somebody that is photogenic in a kind of a bizarre way where you just want to stare at their face because they're so unique.
I heard that Carrie was Stephen King's first published novel, so
I'm
that's
pretty sure that's true. Yeah.
that's pretty cool, and it was pretty faithfully adapted. I know that one of the big changes was in the book, the mother character at the end, Carrie kills her by using telekinesis to stop her heart, but De Palma
Mm.
and the screenwriter, Lawrence Cohen, they thought that that would be a hard idea to translate visually and show in the film, so they were like, "How do we kill off the mom? How do we kill off the mom?" They were kind of thinking about it for a while, and then legend has it that at the restaurant Musso and Frank's, I don't know if you guys have been there in LA. I've been there, but it's like a really cool old Hollywood establishment. Like Faulkner apparently like drank his liver into disrepair there, and like Hemingway had a little booth, and one of the attendants like threw Steve McQueen like out onto his face on the curb after he was fighting with people. There's like so many legendary stories there. But anyway, apparently Martin Scorsese was having dinner with the screenwriter Lawrence Cohen, and then De Palma comes in and he's like, "I know how we're going to kill the mom. We're going to have this kind of Kurosawa inspired telekinesis knife attack where she gets crucified with all these kitchen knives." And they were like, "That's kind of a crazy idea," but then it worked out, and I think it's kind of one of the cooler set pieces in the film.
Yeah, definitely. It's perfect. It's like has that totally over the top melodramatic like ridiculousness but also kind of grotesque like oh god, oh kind of thing. It's perfect. I'm glad
What
that
did
they
you guys
did
think
that.
of the editing of the prom scene? I can't really tell what's going on, and I kind of want to like we already just did 10 minutes of slow motion. Like it seems like they're just like someone had an idea. Oh, like someone in the editing room had the idea. What if we do split screen, or what if we do this and that? And I'm like,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
just see. Do you know what I'm saying? There was like
Yeah,
the
the
split
split
screen, and
screen
then
didn't hit for me at all. I really like the slow-mo at the beginning or like
yes,
the whole slow-mo I thought was awesome and like, there was so much happening in that one Sue character, because also the whole time even on the rewatch, I was like, I can't remember if she's good or bad. Is she in on the joke or is she not in on the joke? I think in the book, it's a little bit more clear that Tommy genuinely likes being there with Carrie and kind of really does have a good time with her. But in the movie, you don't have that inner dialogue that you have on the page. So you're kind of, at least for me, I was like, what is he on in the joke? Is Sue on the joke? How many people are in on the joke? Obviously, John Travolta and Chris are in on the joke. But then watching her on screen slow mo, she goes through so many emotions because she's happy for Carrie and then she's trying to figure out what's happening and then she gets pulled away by the PE teacher. I thought that was great because you go through all of those slow down and they're all really rich to see. Um, but yeah,
Totally.
the split screen was not that impactful. I was kind of like, whoa, okay, this feels like an 80s like jazzercise. And then there was a lot of like synthesizer cymbal crashes, sound effects that were kind of like, all right, we get
for me,
it.
I think it like it lessened the impact of seeing what was happening because I was so like, wait, what? There's like all these things different happening on different parts of the screen. It made it more difficult to like fully digest like the havoc that she was wreaking on all these people. It was like I don't know, that took me out of it a little bit, and I was surprised. But yeah,
I think it would have been enough if it was just the red light and her crazy face and the host. Like he just didn't have to do that whole extra layer of the split screen kind of thing.
Yeah, Isabel, I agree. I also couldn't tell if the other mean girl and her boyfriend were in on it or if, because I was really surprised at the end when it's kind of revealed that they were not in on a joke. They genuinely wanted Carrie to have a good time. I thought I was kind of shocked by that. And then the boyfriend's even hit with the bucket in the head, and he turns out to be a casualty of the prank too.
Hmm.
And the girl, obviously, the only reason she survives is because the PE teacher wrongfully thinks that she's trying to ruin Carrie's night and pulls her out of the building. But I think that was a good thing how De Palma left that purposely ambiguous, and you didn't know if she was a friend or a foe.
I really loved the classic slasher ending scene where Carrie's hand comes out of the thing and she wakes up from the dream. I just love that because I love when I like just it's become like a trope now, which I always look forward to is like the last kill or the last, shock before it, goes to the credits. And that felt really modern and really really fun, I think. Like a fun element of it.
Also, I feel like there's a classic horror trope that the slut dies first, but in this case, that was not the case. The jock, the nice jock, I'm pretty sure is supposed to die when he gets hit on the head with the bucket. Or the PE teacher is the first person to die,
Mm.
which is kind of funny because it's actually like the most virtuous people, or the people that are trying to save her are the ones that end up dying first.
I think the point of that was to show that Carrie wasn't in control of her powers. Because the whole movie, it's kind of this thing that's a knee-jerk emotional response for her. She doesn't like intentionally mean to flip the ashtray in the principal's office. It's just she doesn't mean to crack the light. She just has these anger outbursts or fear or whatever, and it triggers it. And then at the final scene, that's the first time in the movie she's actually consciously like controlling the powers. But even then, things are kind of happening outside of her control because yeah, the teacher was one of the good characters, and so she's still kind of a casualty of this out of control, chaotic power.
But remember, she sees everybody kind of in that kaleidoscopic
Yeah.
thing, and then I mean, you're right. She sees the teacher in a way that's not real, which is why she kills her. But she sees the teacher laughing at her and saying something she never does say, that's something cruel to her and laughing at her, which we know when we step out of that kaleidoscopic viewpoint is not really what's happening, but getting back into Carrie's head. Yeah, it kind of going back to what you said about her being a creature. She has this other vision, anger animal that takes over.
Carrie obviously impacted so many horror movies after this. What are y'all's favorite horror movies? What are some other movies that you guys really like? Maybe that Carrie inspired or anything else?
Suspiria, I really like.
Oh yeah.
Similar vibe with the young girl at school and dealing with the interpersonal, vengeances and cliques of her young social scene with supernatural elements.
Yeah. I like a good body horror film every now and then. Which is obviously like the birth of that. So stuff like Raw and T10 I feel like were really good and very much in the same vein of like how scary and alienating the female body can be, but also how like crazy and powerful it is as well.
Mm.
Immaturity.
Dionysian, you might say.
Yes, some might say.
You were a Camille Paglia fan, you might say.
Um, the two I thought of, I think both predated, but I the Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, I think, are also in a similar vein, and I love both. Um, it's almost like that could be like an unofficial trilogy of like Carrie being like the coming of age, Rosemary's Baby having a kid, and Stepford Wives like moving into that community, the suburban community. Like that's a trilogy of like female horror.
Wait, can you say more
uh
about how you see the Carrie relating to the 2 films?
Well, I mean, they both deal. I mean, on the most surface level, they both deal with like women in different stages of their life. Stepford Wives is about this woman who moves from New York City. She's like a photographer, and they move to this like smaller community in Connecticut. I would actually really love to watch it as part of this podcast. They moved to this small town in Connecticut, and the town is like uh, kind of run by these like secretive men who have all of these like very submissive wives who are basically like these mindless drones. And I guess it's a commentary on suburbia at the time, but it's excellent. It's like an excellent horror movie. And then Rosemary's Baby, obviously, just sort of being the childbirth and pregnancy is another stage of a woman's life. So I feel like that could be an interesting, like, or terrifying watch of those three movies. I
Beautiful
also
and
like other stuff
terrifying.
like yeah, beautiful and terrifying. I mean, I also obviously love Hitchcock, Bird, Psycho, and then even stuff like Scream and like later slashers.
One thing I wanted to add to what Isabel mentioned about the use of sexuality in the film and how it's not fully exploitative of the women. It's showing there's a sensuality, but it's also kind of voyeuristic. I think it's very interesting in how De Palma depicts female nude scenes in this because you remember in the opening of Blowout, he's in the like cheap like schlocky horror film B movie, and it's like this stereotypical slasher film where the guy goes in, there's all these naked women, they're like, ah, and then you think that that's the movie. That's the opening of the movie, but then it zooms out and it shows you that that's actually one of the shitty movies that John Travolta's character is working on, and he's in the edit room because he recorded sound for it. And so again, that's like another way of he opens one of his movies with a bunch of naked girls in a locker room, and then he opens his other movie with the same thing, but it's hammed up in a very exploitative way. And then he kind of pulls out and says, "Actually, no, this is not the movie you thought it was. You thought it was this, exploitative slasher, but it's not. It's actually a more thoughtful political thriller." So I think he's definitely aware of these dynamics and kind of playing with them in different ways in the two movies.
Yeah, you're right. Opening up with this very soft, sensual, steamy, like very voyeuristic point of view of the girls and of Carrie in the shower. And then that's immediately broken by her getting her period, which is a very, I've already kind of talked about the symbolism of the period, but it is kind of like, whoa, this is not a voyeuristic, dreamlike atmosphere. This is a very real, primal, horror kind of thing about femininity and about the cruelty of young girls, and it's kind of takes you out of the voyeurism in a way. It's this sharp dichotomy that's a little jarring, that he throws at you right at the beginning of the film.
Well, I think that pretty much concludes our discussion of Carrie. Before we go, I wanted to ask you guys what are some new movies that you guys have seen recently that you're super into?
Well, Richard Linklater introduced Breathless at the Paris Theater,
Oh,
and
cool.
oh my gosh, it was like I mean, I love the movie, but seeing it on the big screen, and of course he's doing the new film about the making of Breathless, and
Right, right.
it was, I mean, it was just amazing. Natalia had never seen it, so we were there together and watching it,
That's cool.
and it was interesting because it was like I this time around I noticed that the the character of Michelle, he's like this super like magnetic and handsome guy she can't look away, but he's also completely
Yeah, he's like
self-destructive, like
running from the cops the whole movie, right?
exactly, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's such a, but like he has no, he's not looking like two steps ahead. It's just it's always what's the next thing. He doesn't take a long-term view. And I was watching it this time and I was like, I know a lot of people like that. I've met so many like young men who are like totally self-destructive, but also very enigmatic. And I was like, that is such an archetype. And it was like totally fascinating to see it from that lens now. Cause I was like, I know people like this, you know?
How about you, Miles? What have you been saying?
I recently got super into this trilogy called the Pusher trilogy. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Um,
Mm-mm.
Directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, the guy behind Drive, the Danish minimalist, neon drenched director who I'm a big fan of. And then I was going back through his old stuff and I found Pusher. And it's basically he loves Sopranos and he wanted to do like a gangster, like a more archetypal gangster flick. And so this it's basically like Danish Sopranos, but shot in kind of like a Dog Me 95 cinema verite style.
cool.
It's really cool. I like all three, but I think the first one is my favorite. And what's also interesting about it is it has an ensemble character over the three films. So the villain in the first film is the hero of the third
Oh,
film,
that's
the
fun.
anti-hero. So each film kind of adds a new layer of understanding to the characters because a character who in, one might have just been a henchman, all of a sudden in three, you're seeing him with his daughter and you're seeing him all these characters on a much deeper level. So I just think it's really interesting how each of the films builds on one another.
What's it called again?
Pusher
For
one,
sure.
two, and three. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on your letterbox. I was like, I don't know what he's on, but now you kind of sold me on that. That's super
Um,
interesting.
What is this
uh,
guy on?
Mads
Yeah.
Mads Mikkelsen, Mads
Oh,
Mikkelsen.
yeah,
Is it how do you
Mickelson.
say it?
Mhm.
Mikkelsen or Michelson?
I think both.
Okay.
It's
Mads
Mickelson,
Mikkelsen. It's one
Mickelson?
of his. It might be his first film. It's one of his early, if not his first, and he's the main character of Pusher 2, and in
Cool.
Pusher 1, he's also featured prominently.
Cool.
And he's also in Casino Royale. Sorry.
Great villain, great villain.
Did you guys ever see that movie that he did like a year or two ago called like Drink Up or something like that? And it's about like these
Yeah.
three Danish old guys that decide to just be drunk all the time or something. They think it's gonna liberate them or something.
Isn't there theory that they wanna drink the maximum amount before you get drunk?
Yeah, and just always stay at that
The
level.
buzz. They wanna be, like, 24-hour buzzed, like, even
Yeah,
at work, and he's, like, a teacher, and he wants to do it 24 hours a day, like, even at work,
yeah.
and it's, like, this group of childhood friends who are now adults, and they're like, "What if we just stay buzzed all the time because our lives are always better when we're buzzed?" And then it's funny. It's a funny
It's
movie.
so good. I love that movie.
That
Thomas
might be the best way to produce a podcast too, actually.
Yeah.
Just be buzzed the whole time.
Chase the buzz.
I think that's Thomas Vinterberg, the director,
Oh, yeah.
who's created Dog Me 95 with Lars von Trier. Have you seen any Dog Me films?
It's like the movement, like the
Mm.
Danish avant-garde film, whatever. I don't know. I don't know if I have seen any of those.
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophy, the movement, because it was kind of like a way to rebel against some of the more studio controlled movies at the time. So they're like, we don't want any special effects, we don't want any action sequences. It's just people in a room, handheld, shaky cam, and just normal people life stuff. Kind of like a Danish version of mumblecore, and how mumblecore was a reaction to the big studio rom-coms. So, and
Mhm.
all of that time you see all over the world different reactionary movements away from the studio system.
That's cool. That sounds really good. I love mumblecore, so and I
Yeah.
feel like I still watch a lot of contemporary Danish films or, like, Nordic films that are very much like that. Okay, great. So that concludes our discussion of Carrie. Thanks to the listeners for listening. Thanks to my lovely co-host for co-hosting, and we will see you guys next time.